Gotcha. Okay, that's where I was gonna get to. So what you would do is you actually need to record yourself when you're doing it. You need to document a physical reference that you can rely off of. Our process essentially is that you make a thing for another thing to turn it into another thing that goes to your actors.
Hmm.
And in short, that's basically record yourself doing the action so that way you only, one, know that it's possible to be done and it makes sense from the space limitations that you have.
Welcome to Metaverse Degen. I'm Lion.
I'm Old Man Raptor, and our guest is...
Hello, my name is Legend50210.
Oh, thank you very much for joining us. It's an honor to have you on.
Yeah, we appreciate it.
Indeed.
It's a pleasure to be here.
So what is it that you're known for here in VR, and how did you get started with it?
So here in the VR space, I specialize a lot with well, I guess I can't really say that I specialize, but I'm a relatively new VR filmmaker in the scene. I have actually watched a few of the interviews that you have done recently, where you've interviewed people like Kong Luwu and Ariel Emerald, other filmmakers that are in the similar space that I'm also in. I'm very new into the space. Part of the thing that kind of got me into this sort of thing was I had made a film called Sync, which essentially aspired to be a martial arts film that aimed to push the boundaries of what's possible in VR, even despite space limitations. A lot of people think that they need large space requirements. I think you just need a little creativity to get past it. It was a lot on the fact that it was focusing more on like the way that you move your body, the way that you can like lean, move actors. It's just another way you can. It adds another degree of life. It kind of started off where I was posting about the film and then showing off, practicing different degrees of choreography just in the open air. Because there's lots that you can play around with, right? Because there's different ways you can throw a punch, have an actor flinch. If you go forward, side, go up, say you go around back, hit the back of the head, things like that. And all these things can help move your actors. You create like a nice little flowy dance based on how you have your actors move. And it's a real fun thing to experiment with. So I'd say it's fight choreography is what got me on the radar.
Wow. So what got you started with fight choreography, and what got you into Vrchat?
So when it comes to fight choreography, I actually study a bit of some martial arts. I don't have the time or availability to practice it in my, because I work a full-time job but work in a nursing home. So it's basically I go there, I'm exhausted, come back home, get in VR. I do sometimes do other degrees of work or studying while I can. But I have allocated about 2 years for Taekwondo and another 2 for another form called Weichi Ryu. But since I don't have the time to be able to work in those dojos anymore, I kind of put off what I know here in the VR space. I think a lot of people are very fascinated about what you can pull off. The additional trackers tend to help because there's a lot more that you can get away with based on how many points of tracking that you end up having. And when it comes to getting into Vrchat, this actually brings me back to how I kind of discovered VR. I don't know if any of you have ever seen, but if you've ever seen the very first pilot episode for The Fairly Odd Parents, they had a scene where it was the protagonist Timmy Turner. He wanted a video game that was so difficult, where if you ran out of lives and that was like kind of it. But it was the premise of it, right? You had to put on this very large helmet and it put you in this world that felt real. That was the first idea that I had that kind of told me to this extra level of immersion to be somewhere else rather than to be holding something. It is to be somewhere. It was an idea that I kind of held on to for a long while until sometime in, I want to say it was like in my high school years, toward the latter end, when I had started seeing more content creators start posting things about it. These are people like Jameski, for example, was a big one. The whole Vrchat in a nutshell videos. You'd see all these really funny videos, people being people, avatars, all these dynamic things, wonderful worlds, really, really impressive stuff. It was like another degree of life. I had never really taken the time to be, have much of a proper social presence in a virtual landscape before. Properly, I'd say. This is kind of like an additional home for me, and I never really got a chance to get into this until, I want to say, you'll have to fact check me on this, but it was whenever the Quest 1 came out. That was the first time that I had gotten into Vrchat. It was on the original Quest 1, and I'd been in part of Vrchat ever since.
So I
have a question for him, Line.
Shoot.
Okay, when you first came into VR, since you're talking about it and everything else like this, what was the weirdest thing you saw and you got the hell out of there?
Oh boy. Well, I guess it depends. How much am I allowed to talk about here? I've seen a lot of
Just
really
don't-
weird
Anything you
stuff
like.
here.
Anything you want, just don't get us banned. Otherwise, go nuts.
Okay. I guess if we're being real here, this was okay. So I'm gonna try and limit what I say here. I'm not gonna use any direct words, but I believe the world I was in. I went to Midnight Rooftop. It was a public instance, and I was still on the Quest standalone. And I think what it was is people were like all around in like that first little. Midnight Rooftop originally, the default spawn would be upstairs in that fuzzy carpeted room where you had like the little mirror, the little chess pieces on the side, and like if you go out back, it was like the raining rooftop. That's where the spawn was. I remember being there, and it was the first time that I saw a very not safe for work avatar that was just openly visible to see. It was a very, very scarring thing to see. It was very tall individual, unclothed. That's all I'm gonna say.
Okay.
Scarring.
So I've got another one. I got another one for him, Lion. Since you say that you do martial arts and stuff like this, in your boy, brain fart. Now I know what you feel like. In your area that you had and everything else where you said you try to do it with less space. How much space do you actually classify as less space?
All right, so you can actually pan the camera back for this. So I can give you a little demonstration. On my avatar, I have a little marker, if you have me shown.
Mhm.
This marker is a tool that I've also been using for our fight team. I can use this to also draw out my space. So if I were to draw this out,
Oh, wow.
very small.
Very, very, very small. Holy
Wow.
criminy.
Wow.
It is
Hey,
not
it
a
looks
lot
like
to
my
work with.
bedroom.
Yeah.
Looks like my
It does.
bedroom.
Yeah, but the thing
Yeah.
with the small space is I think it's good to have a small space when you're working with choreo because it teaches you a lot about limitation. A lot of people here in the VR space tend to have smaller spaces. So if you are trying to choreograph something for people who have larger spaces and you only have a large space, it's harder to compensate for the more majority of people that you're going to get in who have medium to smaller spaces, which is about like, let's say like less than 10 feet by 10 feet, right?
Mhm.
So when you have smaller spaces, you're like, okay, I know how to break this up more because if it can work for my space, it'll probably work for your space too, because I know I can't go any further than like, 1-2 feet this way, because now at this point, that's a wall.
Mm.
But if I have someone who has a larger space, then I can say, okay, I can go here and here and here. Now I know if I want to give an extra movement opportunity for another body actor, I know I can push it a little extra.
Okay. So since we're on the lines of choreography, with what you do, how much goes into preparing and setting up for a choreographed fight scene in VR?
Oh, that's a loaded question. There's a lot, but you first kind of want to start off with the writing process. And you really need to identify like how you're going to move your actors. A lot of people are going to start off with just having a very back and forth. And you want to try and break that habit as early as possible. Understand that while you can have your actors just move on a singular straight plane, understand that you can rotate these actors. You can move this person this way. You can move this person back into the corner that way. You can move them. They don't need to go back and forth. Practice around with shifting to the left, shifting to the right, forward and right. Or even if you want to get a little creative, you spin the two in a singular motion.
Okay.
Yeah, but the very, very important thing is that when you get down to the scripting process, you're writing everything down. You have to avoid using words like several and multiple and many. You have to give definitive numbers. You need your actors to be 100% clear on what you're doing. So let's say you're writing an anime, right? You're writing an anime opening. Let's say main protagonist throws multiple punches at the antagonist. You can't say multiple. You have to give them a number. Say they throw three. Say you say 5 punches. You have to indicate where that punch is going, from what angle, from what foot orientation that person's in for continuity purposes. And then you have to indicate what the reaction is for the following person that is receiving that. I have like I'm going to be working on like a really, really, really long thread that kind of talks a bit more about my whole choreography process and how you can make it a little more fluid, so that way you're not having an instance where, like, say you have a person that throws a left jab and the other person, they take it and they just go like this. They flick their head to the side, which is takes you out of the moment. You would not flick your head to the side if you get hit with a jab. Or in another instance, let's say, this is actually a more common one. If I were to bring like a really low kick right down into the side of the leg, a lot of people aren't going to know how to respond to that, because most people, when they do try and experiment with fight choreography, they only really aim for space like the front of the face and the center of the body. But they never take into account other places you can hit to, like the side of the knee, the side of the body, back of the head, or to the throat for that matter. There's lots of other places that you can hit than just the face and the body. I think it's really fun to experiment with those things. So the TLDR, be definitive, be articulative, and just be kind of one-to-one with getting your actors on the same page. You want to visualize that everybody is going to paint the exact same apple.
Okay.
Just remind me never to fucking argue with him. He's gonna kick my ass. I'd be an instant football.
Only thing you got to worry about with me is that if my feet are parallel when I'm looking at you, you're safe. But the second that it's not, then you're in trouble.
Hey, I can run fast. I hope.
So
I don't know where I'd run to.
Since you're talking about your system of choreographing a fight scene, is it easy or difficult to choreograph that fight scene in VR? And what are some of the limitations or benefits to doing it here?
Okay, so kind of starting off with the limitations and benefits before I talk about that sort of stuff. The right off the bat, the easiest benefit is availability, and basically the general scope of the whole thing. Because VR, right? This is an online platform. You want to act with people who live in Australia, Canada, Southern America, like all over the world. We're all meeting through the internet. So it's less about finding people in your area, and it's more so about finding people with similar interests that just have the availability of that time. You're getting those people together. It's easier to find people that are willing to work with you. But some of the drawbacks actually come from the fact that we don't have physical references. So you have to start thinking a bit more creatively. You have to, like, let's say you go to high five somebody, right? You tell them to, you can't just tell them, you can't just tell them high five at this one vague area, or just, because then you'll have instances where they go to make contact and both of their hands are going to go past each other, or they're never going to meet, or they're going to be slightly off to a point where it's not going to look good in the slightest. You have to articulate those things. And that's, for our team, we make use of a marker. We can tell people, okay, both these actors, you got to count in, high five at this point here, you both see it, so they know, meet their hands here, hit here, don't go beyond it. And as for the difficulty when it comes to choreographing stuff, this is actually quite a bit of a surprise, but for us, it's ridiculously easy. We've actually been dedicating many, many, many months of research to creating what we have deemed as low latency choreography. I know a lot of people who have tried to experiment with stuff similar. I swear, people tell me that it takes them like 5 or 6 hours just to get a singular good take. Whereas for us, we're just kind of having fun at this point. It takes us just minutes to get a good take, and we found basically a consistent method. We're able to line up virtually anybody as long as they have a stable connection, which in a general sense should be about anybody. We've lined up people from Australia all the way over to the US. We've lined people from pretty much everywhere. The first film that made a proper use of this was the second film that I made, which was The Sparring Lesson, which is where it was being done with myself in the United States, being documented by another friend who was also in the US, but in central US. And then the other body actor was all the way over in Singapore, a full 12 hours away from us. We were able to line up with about minutes of just testing.
Wow. So what is this low latency method, and how did you come up with it?
Oh boy, another loaded question.
I'm good at those. So, fair warning.
Quit doing that. You're getting them confused. You're loading them up worse than a potato.
So to talk a bit about this, it is a very complicated, simple answer. We originally got this idea from another film creator by the name of Photographer. He is another filmmaker who is in charge of making a film series called Cleanup Crew. He invited me on set to go see his production process. I went on, kind of watched over, and he had a very interesting process where it was that he had all the voice acting done ahead of time, and then he would create sound files for the individual actors that would play out from that person's microphone. So it was kind of like a sort of automated process. And then that kind of put something in my mind. What if you kind of take those voices and kind of made like a sort of on rails system where you're giving people cues, sound cues that can't particularly change because it's a sound file. Because of the fact that you can't really rely on verbally saying something to people to give them a different enough time of when to go. Because if you have gaps in your voice, like if I say here and then it's like pause and then pick up again, and if I were to continuously do that, there's going to be instances where the gaps between that will either be really short and it picks up much faster before it catches up again, or ends up being really prolonged to the unfortunate effect of lag spikes, and it ends up offsetting you, and then everyone's going to get a different interpretation of when your real go was. So what I did is I essentially created a process that makes use of entirely sound cues, which is fully customizable based on the limitations of your actors. It's pretty much gotten to a point where the only limitation is just your creativity, and it's very simple. I can give you a little diagram to kind of explain what I mean. So what I'll draw here is kind of, imagine this as like a little timeline for a sound file, right? Over here is the very beginning of it. Over here is the very end of it. The way how every single sound starts, actually here, let me play one through my microphone so you can get an idea.
Okay.
I actually have SoundPad open right here. So this may not sound entirely one-to-one with how it actually sounds from my microphone, but if need be, I can provide the sound to you. That way you can at least play it. That way the audience kind of knows what it's supposed to sound like. But this is what it will sound like. It's going to play through my mic in just a second. I have a delay. First starting beep right there. For other smaller ones, pitch changes, hit marker. So to outline this has several different moving components. There is first the starting beep, which is to indicate that the sound file that you have selected is starting to play, and it's telling the actors to get ready. After that, it goes into what we refer to as the syncing cues, where you're going to get 4 other beeps at a very consistent rate that help to indicate to you how fast this script is. And this is always done in a very, very specific way. For example, the most common ones that we've been using is where the speed between all of these is about 500 milliseconds apart from each other. However, we have been experimenting with slightly faster scripts, and we've been kind of experimenting a little bit with 400 milliseconds, but we'll get to that in a bit. But the thing is that all of this here in the very beginning that's played so far, this isn't the actual script yet. This is just giving the actor information. This is saying, this has started, here's your speed. However, everything else that happens over here onward is the actual script. And what you heard from that bit when it did go off, you heard 3 other beeps followed up with a very articulated hit marker sound effect.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the actual script. And this can be fully customized, right? You can have like mark tap, mark tap, mark tap, mark tap, and keep going. And you can vary this based on like how you're orienting this. But with the rule that you have set here, let's say the distance between each of these is 500 milliseconds. This is something you abide by for the entirety of the script, where everything else here, the distance between here is 500, distance between here is 500, distance between here is 500. You would never have an instance where, say, this is 500, and then suddenly later on, you decide to do something where you have a larger gap where, I don't know, you just do this and you say 800. Because your actors are like, okay, I'm ready for 500. I've got an idea about what that is here. I know to expect it here. Start off here, and you tell them that this is 500. They're going to act at this point because they think that's what 500 is supposed to be, and then you've thrown them 800. They get more complex based on how you do it. And there are some instances where we can actually take these and still, in the similar process to Photographer's method, we still get the voice actors done ahead of time, and we'll actually tie these in with the audio. So that way things like ad-libs and fight sounds or narratives that come out when an actor is talking will play along with these to indicate when an actor is supposed to talk. And that helps us to get that level of automation. Each person hears it from their end. They know when to start. They know when to go.
Okay.
You still can't trust your eyes though.
Okay. I have a question based upon the script if you want to leave that up for a second. The last half, the script
Sure.
part, what do the three starting beeps of the script section indicate before the hit marker?
So this right here, this
Yep.
is what we refer to as a count-in cue. This is basically to indicate that you have a hit marker coming up, which means that you're going to have a 3, 2, 1 count in to help give you a better idea of like, all right, it's about to start. So 3, 2, 1 gives you time to prepare. But there you can have more complicated ones where, let's see if I have another one. I have like a metric ton of these. These are easy and hard to make at the same time. Let's try this one that I used for the sparring lesson. Starts off with 1. You got 4 beeps here. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then a 5 on a count in. So here I'll draw that one.
Okay.
All right, so this one did not use a count in to start because that was like long ago before I properly perfected this method. So this goes on for a little bit longer. So the script went about something like this, where it was going to be sound, hit marker, slight pause, sound, hit marker. I did this for about 4 separate times before we did get a count in. Sound, hit marker, and then it was like sound, 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 hit marker. Right. So you just gotta bend your. I kind of drew that little narrow there, but you get the idea.
Mhm.
So in this instance, here 500, 500, 500, 500, and technically 500, 500, 500. Just follow the process on that. With this, you're still going to have an instance where you're going to have a beep to tell you, hey, an action's starting up, get ready for this. And then hit markers where you're at the extent of your motion or a change in momentum. Let's say you're throwing a punch at someone, hit marker indicates that you've made contact, and the punching person has thrown a punch and has landed, and the other person is flinching. Where if you have something like this for a count-in, it gives you more time to prepare for a larger move. Let's say it's like a really, really wide punch or like a spinning back kick, something like that. Then you would be able to have a proper setup to help set you up to say, okay, I got a big move, wind up for it. Or you can be a little more creative and actually use it as a way of setting an on-rail system where let's say you're having, let's say you've made a grab and you need to like 1, 2, 3 and throw people. You can make markings to indicate you're going to make contact right here, and then you're going to guide your actors at a very specific speed. You're going to go 1, 2, 3, out. So a mark here. You're going to be here at this point, and then out on the final one. So let's say, right, so it's going to be, we're at this point, so we've made contact here. Second beep, our hands here. Third beep, hands here. Hit marker, we're out.
Okay.
You convey that to your actors. Keep it 1-to-1. You just want to be as precise to all of your actors. Again, that same analogy, just trying to get them all to visualize that same apple.
Okay. So when...
All right, I got a question.
Shoot.
I got a question. How long does it usually take you to get 2 people to work together to work as one in a scene? When you get it where you're doing that, how long usually it take?
I'll let you take a guess. How long do you think it takes?
I'd say probably a day, maybe 2 days.
5 minutes.
Oh, wow.
Holy shit. Wow.
You line them up once, assign delays if you need to, and then you're good to go for the entire session at that time.
Wow.
Okay. That blows my mind.
So when you're
it's just, I'm sorry to cut you off.
No,
it's just a very complicated, simple answer. That's all that it really is.
No, it makes a whole lot of sense with what you've explained to us with your method between the indicators of when to prepare and when to strike. It makes a lot of sense. When planning the scene, like before you are in there practicing it, how do you decide what you're going to choreograph and when?
So this can just be kind of script dependent. If you're planning on having a sword fight, then you'd want to kind of like start scripting off, being like, all right, I have these two actors. Where are they going to be in the world? Am I making use of an environment? Am I throwing them into something? Am I throwing them off of something? Am I going to need to move them to a specific place in the map? Are we going upstairs, over a table, stuff like that? And you just kind of want to let the creativity flow through. I find it's very handy to kind of listen to the right music that kind of puts you in that mindset. I mean, like right now, I'm listening to goose hang music right now. It's a very, very peaceful instrument. But you'll find something that kind of puts you in that mindset. You'll hear music. You'll kind of be like, okay, what should I put here? This sounds very intense. I should probably put something kind of in with the music. Sometimes it kind of helps. But there are other instances where if you have enough of a physical fidelity, you can kind of make up stuff on the fly, because there's a lot of really cool stuff that you can do. Really, really cool takedowns. If you decide to throw somebody down, there's many different ways you can do it. You can do going forward, going to the side, going behind, and even then, there's still like a lot more. But you'll have to reiterate the question to me. I kind of went on a tangent.
No, first of all, don't
You're
feel
fine.
bad if you go on a tangent. I will have no problem reiterating the question. How do you plan the fight scene prior to getting the indicator and script sound set up? Like, how do you know you want a punch be thrown here, or you want a kick there, or a grapple there?
Gotcha. Okay, that's where I was going to get to. So what you would do is you actually need to record yourself when you're doing it. You need to document a physical reference that you can rely off of. Our process essentially is that you make a thing for another thing to turn it into another thing that goes to your actors. And in short, that's basically record yourself doing the action, so that way you only, one, know that it's possible to be done and it makes sense within the space limitations that you have. Two, you review that footage and then you go through and look at all the parts where, say, you threw a punch or you threw a swing that is probably supposed to make contact with like the invisible air that you're doing it into, and then you place a hit marker sound for all of those parts. And then three, you move all of that into a sound editing software where you put all the beeps right where you need to. Okay. And then you take those, and export it, sound file when it's all good, and you just give them to your actors.
Okay. I have another goofy question in terms of the whole fighting. How do you do grapples or throws when VR you do not have that other person there? It's just you. Okay,
so if you're trying to, so it just kind of comes down to like how you're going to choreograph it. Mm-hmm. So if you actually want to come here, I can give you a little demonstration.
Sure.
You're gonna be a fucking victim.
I don't mind. Move the camera back a bit.
If you go flying over here, I'm gonna laugh.
Okay, so let's take for a moment. Let's say I wanted to throw you back this way. Mm-hmm. The easy solution is I could just grab and throw you there, but if I want to make it a little more interesting, I probably want to get you into a position where I would probably be able to actually get you to move. I hope you don't have phantom sense, because I'm going to throw a knee into your abdomen.
That's okay. I have no phantom sense.
It's just his balls perfect. You have to worry about. Kick him in the nuts.
Oh, say let. So here's a sample, right? So say if I were to bring my left knee into your abdomen, that's going to have you bring your hips back and your upper body's going to come forward. So if you just act nice and slow with it, knee into the abdomen, yep. I have you here. I'm going to bring my hand to the back of your head, my other hand to your hip. I'm going to push you forward, and you're going to take 2 steps forward and turn around.
Okay.
And you push.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense.
Now I've turned you. Okay. And if I wanted to take you down, then there's other things that you can do. For example, let's say...
Kick him in the balls.
Let's say... All right, sure. Let's say you bring up a leg to try and kick me into the abdomen. There's a method where you can grab this leg, knee into the groin, and then raise that leg up more to set you off balance and make you fall backward.
Okay.
You would need cushioning to fall back.
Okay. Well, that makes a whole lot more sense, to be honest with you, after you explain that. I wanted to ask that question due to the fact that I would know how that kind of thing would work with the lack of person. I appreciate you explaining that. How much of your knowledge comes from your real world into VR, and how have you adapted to the difference in environment?
So I'd say I feel like I've adapted quite well. I mean, I'm at home here in VRchat. a lot of the time, whenever I'm trying to learn different ways to do fight choreography, I actually look to very specific fighting games to kind of get like some inspiration, because it's kind of interesting to see like how different people move. But I also study other things from like HEMA, for example. Some of them have like some really cool motions that are, you know, people and equipment actually moving, making use of the space that they have. But when it comes to like some video game choreography where people have a little more leeway to play around with it, then you get a little more creative. But you have to pick very specific ones, right? I'm not talking about your Mortal Kombat, not your Tekken, not your Street Fighter. I think those, while maybe fun game for some, I don't think those are really the best for choreography. Some good games that I would personally recommend are things like the Batman Arkham series, Sifu, Sleeping Dogs, For Honor, despite how bad it is. Things like that, and things that kind of make better use of like motion starting up, and you have a clear identification of like where they're starting, where they're ending, and where they're going to transition from that position.
Okay. Alrighty. So what made you
Question for you, line?
shoot?
Sorry, I hate cutting you off sometimes. What's the most people that you had in a fight scene? Usually, sometimes you only see one guy against 6 or 7, maybe 10 guys. Have you ever had a scene like that yet?
Let's see. So we've mostly been doing just one-on-one stuff, but we have started putting our foot into playing around with like one versus many. We've actually have a few proof of concepts, or it's like one person against 2 other people. There's a post that I made recently where it was a Darth Maul lightsaber going against 2 other lightsabers. That was a really fun one to do. We didn't even choreograph that. I just kind of told these 3 people, all right, it's a choreography meet. There's no objective. Just pick an audio script that we have made already. Just figure something out. They went through their stuff. They figured out, they already had an audio script that was made. They just said, okay, we have these things here, here, and here. This is what I'm going to do at this point. You're going to do this at this point. They practiced that on their own time. And then I went over like, all right, you ready to go? All right, let me mark out your points of what you all have agreed to do. Practice it a few times with the markings. And then we do it up to speed.
Okay.
Oh, wow. Okay.
You mentioned earlier you spent a few years studying martial arts. Did you study it for this purpose, or did you have knowledge of it prior to VR?
I had knowledge of it before I came into the VR space. It's a really fun thing. I would absolutely recommend it to anyone. I know that there's probably some interest to be able to do it in the VR space, but personally, I would just, if you have time to go to a proper dojo, I would strongly recommend it. There's a better environment that you're going to get when you go there. And when you have to throw a punch and they teach you about your ki, then it starts to feel really good, which is when you can exert all of your force into a shout when you throw your punches. And when you're given that little space to kind of let out, it helps you to kind of control your power, which you wouldn't be able to do if you're in like, let's say, a family house, someone's trying to sleep, you can't really do that. But when you're in a dojo where everyone's kind of all doing the same thing, and you're actually working with like, you know, kicking to certain spots, conditioning yourself, hitting to your forearms, your calves, your legs, your shins, and so on and such, it's better for you. So it's all prior knowledge.
Okay. So what initially got you into the whole scene of martial arts, may I ask?
I'd say it was sheer interest, but a lot of it kind of came into like probably kind of feeling like I wanted to try a little something, a little something else. I used to watch like a couple of action films here and there when I was kind of growing up. Nothing that kind of really stood out. It's kind of more like, that's a really cool way to do fight scenes. That was really cool to watch. I kind of want to imitate that. That was kind of like the child in me kind of wanting to go on something a little more fun. I had started off with Taekwondo, started to learn a lot about kicks, different ways you can move. Then I kind of took a little break from that because I had to catch up on like some studies until I got to my high school years when I said, all right, I want to pick this back up. Let's go to some Weichi Ryu. There's a dojo in my area. This is a fun one. Focus a lot on counterattacking. Great dojo. Love the instructor there. He was a really, really nice guy. I really enjoyed it. I'd super, super recommend getting into a dojo if you have interest in getting into some degrees of fight choreography. Good start.
Okay. So you mentioned earlier about your first film, Sync. What led to the creation of it, and what inspired you to make that specific short film?
Okay, so another loaded question, but this starts a little bit back to when I saw a trailer for a film. Well, first, go back a little bit more. I was kind of first starting to learn about how people were able to watch movies in VR. And at the time, I had joined in on a friend who was in a movie theater. They were watching the Broly movie, Dragon Ball Z Broly. I'm not big into anime. It's not really something I'm really interested in. But I kind of watched it. It was a nice watch. I was like, wow, I'm watching an actual movie in VR. That's kind of nice. And the next day, I was like, I kind of want to take a look at it again. I went in on my own, and I don't remember which theater it was that I went to. But when I went there, I looked to my right, and I was like, Derailed by Acme Jack. It was a poster for a Vrchat made film, and I had never heard of such a thing. And I took it upon myself to just give it a watch. And there was a strange beauty behind it. I was kind of captivated. It was the first thing that kind of put the idea of making a VR film in mind, but I didn't put much thought into actually wanting to make one until I eventually saw another film made by another creator who's called Twice VR. They made a film called How to Fight in VRChat, and it was the second one that they did that took a more narrative approach, that took more use of fight choreography and kind of having a little plot to go around with it. When they were doing that, I noticed something with their fight choreography, and it was the fact that they all acted slowly and sped it up artificially to kind of create the illusion of the fight. So when I saw that, I kind of wanted to take a challenge to say, I want to create fight choreography like this, but I don't want to use the gimmick of slowing down and speeding up after. I want to try and retain the original speed as best as possible and just make it as authentic as I can. And that's kind of began into me starting to play around with like different ways to move the actors. And at the time, this was also before the implementation of EAC. So at the time, I had an artificial mod called freeze frame, which allowed me to create duplicates of myself with as many different avatars as I needed to allow me to essentially be a one-man actor for an entire film set as my own. I was able to essentially, I was able to be the actors and the camera operator at the same time for the entirety of the filming of Sync. But when it came to the story was actually a bit in relation to a friend that I had who was kind of going through a bit of a rough trying to understand who their real friends were. They were dealing a lot with someone who was very manipulative. A lot of people don't really talk about the sort of thing where it's a lot of like, you meet someone, oh, they're so nice. I don't want to, even though this relationship is so negative, I don't want to, break apart from it because you feel a dependency with them. This plot of the whole idea of Sync is about letting you make the decision to break off to better yourself, which is why it is split off into two endings at the very end.
Okay. So with the planning and scripting of the story specifically, how much moments came from real life inspirations and how much did you put in through being made up? Hello, I'm going to quickly interrupt your video. Please come follow us on any of our socials. We have a card down that way in the description, Metaversedegen card.co. You can find us on Discord. You can find us on Twitter, which X, whatever. Right here in this space, you'll see the @ you can find me, Lion. And as well, we have a Patreon, which we've started a whole other show as a thank you for those who've signed up, such as Training Fangs, Forbidden Zero, and Niche. So thank you all for watching the video on how these games are going. I'll leave you to the rest of it. Enjoy.
So I would say that the fight choreography came first. I think that was personally probably one of the flaws of the film. I kind of felt the urge to just put a fight scene in every single scene that there was. It just kind of started off being like a fight that I wanted to show some people some fight choreography, and then I thought to myself, I could probably turn this into a bit of a story, and I could probably kind of turn this into like a little message to tell people to stand up for themselves and do what's best for yourself. And I wanted to kind of take the story of a friend that kind of went through that sort of ordeal to kind of tell everyone, you're strong, you're independent. You don't need to feel like you need to depend on this person that is so harmful to you. So I'd say the choreography definitely came first over that, which I think I could have spent a little more time on the writing, but I think it still hit the major beats that I needed it to.
So from that movie, what were some of your favorite scenes and how long did it take to film them?
Oh boy, hang on. Let me get my phone real quick. I've got my phone right here. I actually have it written down how long that all took. Because as a reference, when I had done the film of Sync, I was the only person that was, the actor, because it was using that mod, freeze frame, to allow me to be able to do it all on my own. And there it is. All right. So this is all after that I had all the scripting done. So this was all like I went in, got into the recording, ready to go. Let's see. We were about 17 hours and 50 minutes of just recording.
Wow.
That's what it was. It was a fun experience. And as for my favorite scene, a lot of people like to mention in the first scene where the main protagonist flips one of the others over while they're on the ground, and the camera does a really cool 360 spin. A lot of people ask me how I did that, but it's also a very simple answer. All I did was I simply grabbed the camera with my arm superly overly rotated. I detached the camera from the window, and then I slowly rotated it and
Okay.
recentered it back up.
Okay. Did you have any filmography experience prior to that short film, or was that the first instance of you recording and filming anything?
I'd say it's probably the first, honestly. The only real ambition that I had from kind of understanding the general foundations of filmmaking was I had a class in my high school year where it was in photography. But that's when I had also learned that there was a fair bit of carryover. And at the time, I was also kind of working on some little machinima projects for the For Honor game that I used to play. I was very big into that because I loved the animation style. I wanted to push the limits on that, and I learned they had a free camera mode at some point. I was like, all right, everyone, let's try and make a story with this. And I wanted to kind of start off by taking some of the stuff that I learned from that class, the rule of thirds, leading lines. Oh, that was framing, but I wanted to kind of start off with that. And it wasn't until I got into VRchat and I learned about, the derailed, started learning about sync, going through all these different processes to learn. And I started to say, this has some merit. This is something I could turn into something. And it has a lot of very positive feedback. And I wanted to keep going with it.
Okay. Now, you also mentioned you
I
had
have a question, Line.
Okay, shoot.
Go ahead. You got it. Go for it. You got it. Just
Okay.
go ahead, Line.
What led to the creation of the second film you mentioned?
So the second film isn't anything too special. It's mostly the fact that it was going to be another film, which unfortunately still today has not seen the light of day. I'd say it's been canceled since because of just some other ties that I've kind of broken off. But the purpose of the second film, the Spawn Lesson that we made, was because of the fact that there was Virality Silva that was coming up. And we thought to ourselves, while we were in the process of still testing our method with our audio scripts and our low latency stuff with our friend in Singapore, we're like, this would be a great opportunity for us to showcase our work, to tell everyone, this is what we're doing. This is how long it took. This is how it's possible in VRchat right now. And we took the challenge and we said, let's make something. And we went out there, did it in about, I want to say it was like 6-7 hours, give or take, overall. I think it was between 2 to 3 days it took. There were some elements that were still kind of needing help. We didn't have the marker at the time because our research didn't extend that far yet. Our method's a lot better now. We have actors that have been on the team that we have for at least 3 months now, and everyone's able to just, you give them like a couple things to do, you give them an audio script, and they're ready to pick up in just a few minutes.
Wow.
You say that you have facial tracking and stuff like this. What gear are you using to get the reaction that you have? Because, man, his eyes blink really good.
It's the Vive Pro Eye is what I have. I have the mouth tracker too, but having all that extra bulk under the headset, when one, you have to sneeze and you have to train yourself to not sneeze onto the module, or when you look down and you bump into your own chest, I've kind of taken upon myself to just kind of keep the mouth tracker off, but I have the Vive Pro Eye to be able to get the eye tracking, which, doesn't require any bulk, thankfully.
Okay.
I am, unfortunately, the last of my kind.
You mentioned earlier that you've adapted and changed your method for fight choreography. How much has changed since you first started?
So are you talking a bit more about like the differences in our low latency method, or are you talking about the differences between doing martial arts versus in here in VRchat?
Low latency method in terms of how you adapted it, your fighting to VR. And you mentioned that things have changed over time. That's why I asked.
Yep. Gotcha. So our low latency method has changed a bit. It's gotten better because we've learned a bit more about things that are a bit easier to comprehend. I actually hadn't even spoken about like how we actually line our actors up.
Oh,
But the way that we line up, believe it or not, we basically it's a very simple answer. It's emojis. These are
emojis.
network synced.
Hmm.
Yep. This means that when I throw this out, you both are going to see this at the very same time, at the exact consistent time that I throw it. And here's another interesting experiment that you can do as well. With another person, you can trust me on this. When I say go, I'm throwing this emoji at the exact same time when I say go, which also proves why we don't use voice as a method for saying goes, right? Here's an example. 3, 2, 1, go.
Go. Okay. Interesting.
Right? You probably saw me throw the go emoji before I even said the word go, right?
Okay, yeah. So
So if we build a consistency with that, we've learned that we can use that to kind of line people up and say, all right, we've got this consistent method. We've got you starting there, you starting there. You're faster. Let's give you a delay in our software. Let's say 500 milliseconds. Line up, run it again. Good to go. Good for the whole session.
Wow. How long did it take you to find that specific method of using emojis?
It took a little bit. It didn't take a long time though. It was an idea I had because there was a time when I was working with what was it? Because at the time needed to, for one of the scenes in my first film sync, I needed to get into one of the maps. What's that one? It's the one by the person who made that crossover between it's Ghost World. It's that Ghost World. It's you're in a police office and you get the guns from the wall. It's kind of like TTT, right? I needed to get into that map for more scenes, but the problem is that it's a game world, so you can't get into those places unless you have, at least 3 people. And because I was a single person working, I didn't have the people to get in because I didn't have a name for myself yet. So what I did is I had a subscription service to a PC streaming platform called Shadow, which I booted up on my other less efficient laptop. So that way I had that going up. And then I also had my other quest on for a moment to at least start to get me in the game. That way I could turn the quest off, keep the laptop running. And while I was doing that, I noticed that at some point when I would throw an emoji, the same time that I would see it on my end, I'd see it on the shadow as well. And you think this wouldn't be much of a big deal until you realize that the shadow that I'm connected to is like multiple states over. So it's not connected to that first laptop I'm in, it's connected over there, it's being received at that same information. So I held on to that for a little bit until I thought to myself, what if we try it with emojis? These might be network sync. So then we started to line people up and to say, you're not going to listen to when I say go, you're going to watch for when you see this. And then when we started practicing with that, we started getting way more consistent results and much quicker intervals. So it just became a staple of what we did for lining people up.
Okay. So in terms of fight choreography, what is some of the more difficult things to do in VR, and what are the easiest things to do in VR?
Let's see. I'd say throws are tricky. It depends on like how you're going to do a throw. Like if you're going to throw somebody over your shoulder, you have to give yourself more leeway to do it. But also you need to keep in mind how much space you're going to occupy when you're moving these actors. Because one of the biggest hazards that you have is, you don't want your actors to hit something. You don't want them to hit a wall. You don't want them to walk into one. You don't want them to step towards something and suddenly it's their desk. So that's why we have taken account into making use of the marker to say, if you're going to hit toward the abdomen, you're going to send a little line, a little circle there. That way, come here, hit there, don't go beyond. And then another one here, circle, hook up, hit there. And you have these actors do a mixture of acting on sight and with sound, where they're going to be watching the markers and ignoring the other person. So this doesn't entirely get rid of latency. It more so offsets it. Because you can take whoever's acting first and give that person a delay and bring them back down to someone who is slower.
Okay. So what have been some of your favorite scenes from those movies in terms of fight choreography, and why?
Let me see. Okay, so for the first film in sync, my favorite one was the one where it was toward the final fight, where I'd say it's tied between where the main protagonist threw a straight kick and the antagonist had their foot and just kept lifting it up to force them onto their back, which is a really fun one to do. Or it's one where it was a bit more fun, kind of sound wise, where the protagonist was kind of brought down into a sort of submission pose here and was able to raise an elbow right up into cracking a monocle of the antagonist. And for the second film, I think my favorite one for there was also toward the end where we incorporated a throw, where it's after I had did like a little stun, I had the back of my right hand behind my assistant's head, pulling them back while using my right foot to trip over their front foot and have them go behind me.
Okay. What motivates you and your team in order to continue doing this research and the filming of your style?
We just want to see the filmmaking industry grow. We love pushing boundaries. We love to experiment. We want everybody else to adopt this method. We've been super open about trying to get our research out there. We actually have a panel at Virality this year where we're going to be talking about our method again to another wider audience. We're covering the same things that we've just talked about, just more in depth, talking more about the creation process, the rules you follow, how you get actors lined up, how you get the actors to interpret the information. And we generally have our team meet like at least once or twice every week. That way everyone keeps everyone keeps sharp. Everyone just says, all right, this is what we're testing. We have an idea. We're going to test this little gimmick with something. Let's say it's going to be, let's say we're going to practice with getting voice lines in with the audio scripts. We tested that already. It turned out great. The next thing we're going to test around is with an avatar that can actually move another actor, which we're kind of doing in line where, let's say if you were to like grab a prop and you were to throw it at another actor, let's say you throw a glass at somebody. In VR, what you would do is you would never actually have that actor grab that prop and actually throw it, because then you run the risk of a couple things. One, missing. Two, throwing wrong and drop early, throw too high. Or you also have the probability of the fact that when you grab a prop, the way how everyone else perceives that is that when you grab that prop and you pull away, that prop doesn't sink to your hand until you've reached a certain distance away, and then it snaps back to your hand, which is a little unnatural. So what we end up doing is that when we incorporate throwing props, what we'll do is we'll actually have an invisible actor that's actually holding that prop for this other person. So let's say there's actually an example of this in one of our gifts that we did, where we had another one of the Kulins that was holding a little beer mug, and somebody else took a pool cue, hit the mug up out of their hand, and swiped it down out of the air into hitting someone else's face. With that, we had an invisible actor holding onto that mug for that Kulin, and we had them lined up with the audio script. So that way, they got their cue, they know to go up, follow a rail, and then lead down toward the other actor that they also knew that they had an impact incoming.
Okay. That's actually very interesting. How, for those odd scenes like that, what led to you using invisible actor versus throwing it normally?
I'd say practicality. I really want our team to kind of avoid as much VFX stuff as possible, because I want everyone to kind of know that there's a lot of amazing things you can just do in the engine chat, right? So like, here's actually a pretty easy one. If you've ever felt that you are sitting in a chair, let's say you're in like a car in Vrchat, right? You sit in a chair, your entire lower body becomes it becomes, completely still. You can't move any of it. You can break that easy by just going into your settings, enable AFK animations, open your Steam menu once and close it. The AFK animation breaks that little lock position that you're in, and you still get the full fidelity, your full body back. And with that, what we're able to do is we can actually be on top of moving objects. Like if we're on, let's say we have like a moving car or like a train that for some reason has seats on it that also moves physically in the world instead of the world moving with the train still. You could have an actor pinned to that chair and still have the full fidelity of that. And with an actor that can actually have seats on their hands, we would have an actor sit on that, break the animations then, and then we can do really fancy stuff. Like say if they need to do like a let's say they do like a really cool backflip. You can have an actor do a really, really cool technique that I've actually learned from the spider layer people, where they're actually laying on their sides on a spinning chair that has no back on it. They use horizon just to be level with the floor. And then all they do is they kick off from their wall and they spin sideways while it looks like they're spinning backwards. You just line that up with someone that's holding them, go up, back down. That's what we have in theory. We have to test it though.
Okay. So either in real life or VR, was there anyone that inspired or helped you along into where you are?
Oof. I guess I can say at first it was there was a friend that I ran into. His name's Gab Jenkins. He's a friend that I ran into when I was playing a game of Fate of the Herbloss. We hit it off. We talked about films. He's a film student. He already knows a lot about film stuff, and he was originally like the first drive that I kind of pushed me more into wanting to make films in VRchat, because I was like, oh, you didn't know about films in VR? Here, I've been like cataloging all these films while I've been learning about some stuff. Check these out. That way you can see what the environment's like. And he was the person that actually did the camera work for that second film that I mentioned, the sparring lesson. He helped me for a while, but since then he's kind of gotten a bit busy. He's kind of working off on other things, so I've kind of taken it upon myself to kind of create a team of my own, and we all kind of support each other. We say, all right, we're ready to do this. Morale is high. We've got all this progress to work on. We have all these people that are like really eager and excited to see what we do, and we're really excited to share this information with people because we want other people to do it too.
How did you meet your team that you're working with currently?
It really just started with a poll. I just told myself I'm only going to be able to start making progress with making films and continuing my research if I take the initiative and say, okay, I need to outsource. People already know that I've done a fair bit of choreo work. They know that I have a bit of research that I'm kind of sitting on at the moment. And what I did is I just made a simple Google form, filled it up with a bunch of questions, all the specifics, time zones, avatar type, all that sorts of stuff. And I threw that up and I said, hey, you want to work on a VRchat film with fighting stuff? Check out this form. I'll get your availability. I made like 5 spreadsheets of everyone's time zones converted into mine. It's a nightmare to look at. I could have just told people in Discord, like, does this work for you? It could have been a lot easier that way, but I think it's better to have spreadsheets, honestly. But it, long story short, it was just I made a spreadsheet. No, not a spreadsheet. I made a post. I just asked people if they wanted to work, and people were interested. I got them involved, ran some tests, and then once we started running our actual choreo test, getting everyone situated with it, and I was like, let's see, let's hope this method still works after all the changes. We tested a couple of times, and it showed that it still had its good old merit because it's just practicality. And then I started showing it to the team, and then suddenly everyone had a huge boost in morale.
Wow. When you made the post, was there more or less interest from the community than what you were anticipating?
I'd say there was a little bit more. I wasn't exactly looking to hundreds, but I wasn't really looking to have like a massive team. Because when it comes to fight choreography, not everyone's a fighter. Not everyone knows how to fight. In fact, we actually have a handful of people on our team that are actually dancers. Most of them only joined the team because they wanted to try something new. So it's actually not only a learning process for just the method, but a learning process for learning how to fight too. But then we do have a couple people who have joined in with some degree of fighting under their belts, whether they be somebody that actually watches and studies choreography and other sources and media, or we have some people who have actually studied Nihon Taijutsu for numerous years and have joined the team because they want to put it to good use.
Is it easy to teach the dancers how to do fight choreography? Is it a translatable skill?
I'd say so. Yeah, there's a different way you have to do it, because when you're dancing, you're moving around, you're kind of moving in, slowing down. Whereas here, you're creating power, moving back, going forward, letting that power come forward, and you're not really making anything that's flourishing. You're not really. It's hard to describe, but there is carryover. It's a learning curve. it's something you have to kind of teach. There's actually a thing that I kind of did where actually, can I say this? I don't want to spoil too much about what I'm trying to say here, but I guess I can be vague about it. There's a project that we're also working on where I took a small portion of our team and I told them all, I need you all to practice anything that you know, and when the time is right, I'm going to pull you off one at a time, and I'm going to have you provide me with something. I didn't tell them what it was yet, but when I met with them individually, I told them, you get 1 minute and 30 seconds to give me anything of fight choreography. I will not stop until the timer is done. Go for it. I did that for all the people that I was working with. And when the time was up, the reason I did that is because I wanted to put them on the spot to see what they can do on the spot for fight choreography. So that way I could learn their styles, see what they've learned, and then create choreography that complements their style for a project that we're doing.
Okay. What helps you make your choice in those people based on those parameters?
Ambition. There's not really a requirement. If people want to make something, I'm super adamant about it. We have a lot of patience on our team. I mean, we'll be in an instance for like 2 or 3 hours because we're super adamant. We know the process. We know it takes a long while. We're never really going, because even though our process, it takes, it's super quick. A lot of our processes is just like, we're going in, I'm giving them an audio script or a couple, and I'm telling them to make something up on the fly. So a lot of our events end up being like 2.5 to 3 hours long, which is fine because everyone is like super adamant about it because they know all the amazing results that come from it, especially with how easy it is once we start getting results going. Because while the choreography in the moment process takes, let's say something like 2-ish hours or 1.5 hours to like practice and like get in that motion. Then when we like get the lines involved, everyone knows where specifically they're going and at what times they're going to be going at. Then it's just that little final bit of rehearsing, and then we get a result in like less than 10 or 15 minutes. Fully replicable as well.
Oh, okay. How much rehearsing do you go through before going to the final recording?
It varies on person. I actually just finished. I was meeting with another component of our team because we're working on our submission for our virality community showcase. There's like 2 more groups I have to meet. We're doing filming this week. I just met with the first group earlier today. Because we had such a tight timer, because they Virality had opened their submissions like a month earlier than I thought. So like, oh no, they've changed their stuff. I thought it was gonna be a month later. Oh, gotta move this project. Gotta move them around. And then we started working on this new project, and it's kind of put us into a bit of a mess. But it's all smoothing out right now because we've put I want to say maybe like 5 or so hours of rehearsal per team. So we're looking about like 13 to 15 hours total so far. Okay. And now we're kind of going into the process of recording.
Okay. Now, where do you plan on going long term? What are your goals for sync in your whole project and research?
So I have a very large roadmap of films that I want to make, some experimental stuff and some other things that we really want to make. The team that I have is here for the long haul. They're super excited to work on what we have planned. We have a lot of really, really cool stuff in the works right now. And I do absolutely think that people are going to really enjoy what we have made for our submission.
Okay. All right. In the camera work for me. Thank you. From the real world or VR, is there anyone you derive inspiration from with all of your work you've done so far or projects you're working on?
I'd say I get inspiration from the film community. There's a lot more VR films that are out there than people tend to think. To this day, sometimes whenever our team has little film nights, because I like to show them kind of like, here are these other obscure films that you probably might not know about, just to kind of like get everyone a better idea about what the bar is for VR filmmaking at the current moment. Sometimes I'll say it's a friends plus instance, that way they get some other people involved, check out what's up. And a lot of the time we still get some people that are like, I had no idea people are making movies in VRchat. And It's just kind of like that urge to present something new, something that's so different from just, working in Blender animations, right? I have a lot of respect for them, but when you work in VRChat, there are so many limitations, and the fact that this platform was never originally meant for filmmaking in the first place is why filmmaking is so special. Because all of these tools and processes only exist because the community wants it to exist. VRC Lens was not a tool that was made by VRChat. This process of low latency method was not made by VRChat. These avatars that we all don and all these cool tricks that exist, these don't exist because VRChat made them. These are made by the community. People want these things. People want these genres, these avatars, these assets, these films. People want to be able to make something awesome. And I think that's why the VR filmmaking community is just so special.
Okay. So why the VR filmmaking over the other places you could through like using game engines or the real world? Why VR?
I feel like it's the hurdles. You learn a lot from hurdles, and it's a bit more special that way. Because while I have a lot of respect for Blender, because it gives you all the tools that you need to make something, where again, falling back to what I said earlier, VRChat doesn't necessarily give you many tools, right? You have the ability for full body, and you have like a default camera, and then you have like the plethora. Well, no, I can't just say that. It's realistically just the being able to do full body and having a camera. That's realistically it. Everything else, worlds, avatars, prefabs, VRC Lens, the low latency method that we've gone over, that's all made by the community. People have created these tools, which are all completely unofficial and not presented up front, which means that these things only exist because the people that have created them want them to exist. We're all making this together, and we're all rising up together.
Okay. You mentioned earlier that one of the reasons is the hurdles that you can learn from. What have been some of your favorite or more interesting hurdles that you've worked through?
Let's see. I'd say honestly the biggest hurdle is just getting the latency study just right. Because whenever it was trying to test an idea, it's always going to be either we learn something that does work or we learn something that doesn't work. The very beginning of our low latency process was a lot about trying to find out, let's make sure that this method works. And now that we have found out that the method absolutely works with the parameters that we've tested, now we've entered the phase where we're trying to break it on purpose. We're trying to go through with faster scripts, more ambitious stuff, trying to say, is creativity the only limitation? And at this point, it's looking like it's just like, if you want to do it, if you can pull it off, then it's absolutely possible.
Okay. Well, Legend, thank you so very much for joining us. It was an absolute pleasure getting to meet and hear from you. So thank you for your time.
Yes, indeed. Very indeed.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Where can the audience find you and your work and your team if they wish to reach out?
So right now, our team isn't currently open for any new people at the current moment because we're still trying to work toward our first film and and our follow-up, which will hopefully be sometime after June. But you can find me on Twitter, same name here, Legend50210. We very frequently try and post, the results that we get from our meets. We usually meet at least once a week, but hopefully sometime soon we are going to be looking into getting some more people involved in the group. We'd love to teach more people the method, get more people involved in the projects we're working on. I think it'd be a lot of fun.
Well, thank you very much. And to all of you watching, we'll see you in the metaverse. Raptor, you know the thing. Oh.
Yeah, I do. If I beg real hard, folks, knowing that you can do almost anything in here, and Legend has proved that, he might teach me how I can go around kicking people in the toe. You have a good one, folks, and watch your feet. I might just be there. Bye.